All right, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Tao. I'm a customer advocate for Govlist. And today our webinar is going to be talking about new ways of thinking about software for government purchasing. If you look on the screen, you'll notice that we're going to quickly talk about how to use the webinar tools. First, you can see here on the left, if you want to go to full screen, there's the button to do that. You can also, with the little hand there, you can raise your hand. You can also change if you're using headsets versus your speaker, you can change that option there. And then finally, if you have questions, you can just type them in the question area that you see there. All right. So I'd like to introduce to you today our host. Liam Dorpalen-Barry is our CEO. As you see here, his background is in management, consulting, and software engineering. And he's been working with a number of procurement officers around the country to help them solve a lot of problems dealing with collaborating and creating solicitations and working with vendors and working with the folks who are evaluating responses. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Liam and he'll take it from here. Hey, Liam.
Hey, Tao. Thanks so much for having me on this webinar. Really excited to participate. So we're actually calling in right now from Florida, and we've been at the FAPPO Conference here in Orlando for the last few days and have met some really incredible people and had the really fortunate opportunity of being part of a really incredible and close-knit purchasing community here in Florida. So I wanted to, first of all, extend a huge thank you to all the purchasing officials in Florida that participated and made this conference possible. But secondly, also wanted to share some of the experiences that we took away from being part of this group of folks who really opened up to us and shared some of their experiences in the realm of purchasing. So, we worked on consolidating some of what we've been hearing from the conference so that we could share it with the rest of the community that may or may not have been able to participate in the conference this year. So first and foremost, we met some really incredible characters that shared intimate experiences that they had as purchasing agents with us, some of which ranged from incredible to comical to really meaningful feedback that we received that we've learned a ton from. So first and foremost, we met someone who opened up to us and literally shared that their first RFP that they had ever done was for an electrical chair maintenance services. And all puns aside, it was a really great moment to hear about how this person went from the bottom of the totem pole in a large purchasing organization to the purchasing manager, and what her experience had been like learning how to navigate RFPs. We met folks who consistently, one of the themes we had heard was folks who felt like customers would send them half-baked scopes and want the RFP to go out tomorrow. That was a really common theme that end users and customers didn't fully understand or set reasonable expectations around the timelines that purchasing could deliver on. And they also frequently didn't put the work in up front to draft a scope that was really meaningful and helpful for the buyer or the purchasing official who had to then take that scope and fill out the rest of a solicitation document that was ready to go out to bid. We heard, "I'm not an expert in what I'm buying," over and over again, that people were overwhelmed by the variety and type of goods and services that they had to purchase. We heard, "I spend most of my time collaborating with customers, answering basic questions, and just trying to get them to follow the rules." That was another common theme, that it was a struggle to collaborate with those customers and those end users because, frankly, a lot of folks already had solutions in place to automate the requisitions and purchase orders and the more routine financial side of the equation, but spent a lot of time having to train and retrain customers to fill out forms. Over and over, we heard, "I am splitting hairs, keeping track of document versions and consolidating them into a master doc." which I personally really empathized with because I've been through that process before and literally remember what it was like to be on version 56 of a document, getting emailed 5 different versions from different stakeholders who all wanted changes, and then manually having to consolidate all of those changes into a document. And then finally, customers brought up that, time and time again, they found themselves in sticky situations where once they had drafted a solicitation and passed it around, customers would make changes to the terms and conditions and key boilerplate sections of a document that would leave the purchasing officer in the dark about those changes, and they'd only learn later that something had been updated. So that's a brief summary of what we've talked about with those purchasing agents. And I wanted to turn the conversation a little bit and talk to you a little bit more about where those conversations led. Because when folks came to us and asked and opened up and shared those experiences, little bells went off in my head and in our team's heads that there was a better way. And so I wanted to introduce you guys to a world in which what if, for example, you knew about projects months earlier when customers first started planning them so that they didn't get dropped on your desk at the last minute? What if projects arrived at your desk fully written and thought out so they weren't half-baked? What if you have access to your peer solicitations all across the country at your fingertips so that you never had to reinvent the wheel again? What if you no longer focused on version 56 of a Word document when you were writing an RFP or a solicitation? What if instead the new way of thinking was an online real-time collaborative experience where all of those changes would be tracked and updated automatically and you could focus on really adding value to a scope? What if you were able to actually control the underlying boilerplate in a document so that end users or customers never had the opportunity to update it without checking with you? Because that's a world that I've seen purchasing agents and officers enter into. And I'd be really excited to share some of the ways that we've seen people properly execute on that vision of what it could be like by showing you some more about how folks have used Govlist to achieve those types of goals. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of Govlist. And by the way, in the background here, if any of you were at the conference, this is Tao, who is a core member of our team and was also a very active participant in the conference this year. Giving you an overview of the Govlist solution. So we've seen folks leverage the first module here on the left-hand side, the solicitation writer, to achieve some really incredible outcomes, collaborating with stakeholders in a real-time environment online so they didn't have to track changes in Word documents and email, but were able to achieve streamlined and significantly faster collaboration, as well as to learn earlier about projects in advance. Secondly, I wanted to go over our sourcing portal a little bit. And in there, I can share how folks have been collecting proposals online in a structured and automated way to eliminate confusion and rework. And then thirdly, was going to jump into our evaluations and scoring module. And this is where folks have been able to automate the scoring process and evaluation process for projects. And then finally, do a brief overview of analytics. Because this whole process is now tracked online instead of in a Word document, we're able to run and score analytics and metrics that can be extremely valuable insights for an organization when thinking about how to position and improve their processes. So I'm going to touch on all 3 of those briefly. I'm going to do that by walking you through the software, because sometimes I think that a picture can tell 1,000 words, and actually seeing a tool in practice will hopefully help explain to you how folks have been able to achieve those outcomes through implementing software like Govlist. And with that in mind, in the background here, we have David, who is the architect and mastermind behind the Govlist solution. And, David and his team have been able to achieve some really incredible things, and I'm really excited to share those with you now. So what you should see now is my screen, and I've just opened up an instance of Govlist here to walk you guys through those very quickly, those modules that we talked about. And I wanted to kick it off by setting an expectation with you up front. So we are not an e-marketplace for vendors. We're focusing on the workflow and experiences that take up time for real procurement pros in their day-to-day jobs. We're not focusing on the marketplace part as much as some of the other solutions you might see out there. We're really software built to make the lives easier of purchasing pros where they spend most of their time, which we find is oftentimes collaborating with those customers and end users, writing scopes, filling out solicitation documents, and getting them online to quickly get responses. So I'm going to start off by diving into that first module that we talked about, where we start automating the collaboration between you and that customer. And we can do that by actually quickly walking through what it looks like to create a new solicitation in Govlist. So I wanted to walk you through the setup process, and that starts with creating a new document. Govlist is going to ask a few background questions about what you want to buy. And let's imagine that we are going to buy, for example, holiday decoration services for the city of Gotham. And that, for this upcoming holiday, we want to put lights and banners up on the trees and poles of our main street in the city to create an atmosphere for the holidays. And that's going to include a few different components, right? So there's a design element to that. There's probably there are some goods that need to be purchased to make that happen. And then there's also a services component of actually executing and implementing on that design with the goods that are purchased. And all of that together can create a more complex purchase, where we would need probably a scope of work and pricing tables to evaluate vendors side by side. So I'm going to start off and answer some of these basic questions about this project that we're doing. And by answering these questions, Govlist is going to guide us to a specific flow. It's going to tell us to create an RFP document. And it will create a step-by-step guided process for me as a project manager to fill out forms that will be then submitted to the purchasing team with a full scope and all of the details flushed out for this particular project. And I'm going to start by just filling out some brief details so you can get a sense of how this works. I won't do it all, but then we can also jump into a fully built project, and then I'll show you what it looks like in the sourcing and evaluation side. So let's call this holiday decorations RFP, and the tool already knows 80 to 90% of what's going to be put into this document. Just because of who I am and what it already knows about me. So we need decorations for the city for the upcoming holiday season. And I'm just going to fill in some kind of basic sections in here that are going to be, combined into that final RFP experience or document that we've created. And the tool, for example, is going to fill out all the timelines for me, and it's going to set reasonable expectations up front, saying this is when we expect you to release the project, when we expect questions to be back in, when the proposal deadline should be, and roughly when you'll have a selected contractor. And of course, these can be updated for the project, but they can be incredibly valuable to set reasonable expectations up front from a project manager's perspective. And I'll also note that as soon as I create this project, while this is not visible to other project managers inside the city, I'm controlling permissions on it, as an admin user, the purchasing team would immediately be able to see this project and be notified that I started thinking and working on this holiday decoration project, so that they could anticipate this project coming in the pipeline and would have a sense of what's going into it before it actually gets to their desk. Now, I'm just going to skip a couple sections and I want to do a scope of work with you, and I want to show you how pricing tables work, because I think those are two of the most important sections in drafting an RFP, and they're two extremely powerful tools that Govlist offers to that end user to make their life easier when writing it. So let's start out by creating a scope. And you'll notice first and foremost that there are instructions walking me through how to create a great scope of work. I'll just skip them now and jump into actually creating one. And here on the left-hand side, you'll notice there's actually a fair amount of suggested content. But on the right-hand side, this is where I'll actually create my scope of work items. So for example, I might create one item that's called decorative goods for project. And this is vendor will be a direct supplier of all decorations. And we'll consider the vendor responsible for finding those decorations. But I can also go into a scope library and access a network and community of other cities, counties, and agencies around the country who have already done similar projects. Not to mention historical projects that have happened in my own organization. So let's go in here to the scope library. Oh, it looks like there are a couple similar projects that Govlist has already identified as potential examples of where I can use language from. And I can actually see in here how popular they are. So this one's been used before. This one hasn't. Let me jump in and grab this holiday lighting and decorative services project. Govlist is actually going to extract the scope of work for me. I can read through, select the ones that I want, and then copy over those items into my project. And boom, we've already created a scope of work. And in fact, because this was written by my organization, it's already brought in some other requirements or language that that our city has suggested be in this project. And this is language that you can actually customize as an organization and build a knowledge base of content that's suggested to users. If there are any additional documents, you can just drag and drop them in here. But that's really the foundation of writing a scope in Govlist. And we found this to be incredibly powerful with lots of other organizations around the country in helping their project managers not only accelerate the speed at which they can write scopes, but also dramatically improve the quality by leveraging content out there and never having to reinvent the wheel again. I'm going to jump in and create a pricing table as well. So pricing, again, is another really common area where we see lots of basic question answering and need for collaboration between procurement and the customer. And what Govlist has done is created a guided flow that not only explains how to create a great pricing table, but will actually suggest content to that project manager and then format the table for them so there's no possibility of mistakes. Over here on the left-hand side, Govlist has pulled up some common pricing items for this project, as well as some of the scope of work items that we had put in there. Potentially for this project, let's price it based on the scope of work. So perhaps we're going to buy some goods for the actual decorations. Let's say there's going to be implementation, maintenance, and then removal and storage services as well. Govlist will actually automate the creation of that table, and boom, we have a perfectly created pricing table, and this will actually be inserted into the RFP itself. Finally, I'll just quickly create evaluation criteria, and then we should be good to go. After walking through each of these sections, Govlist will also pull in your standard contract and insurance requirements, attach them to the document, and we can check and make sure. But yes, it looks like we filled out all of these sections, and Govlist actually won't let the end user submit this document for review until they've properly filled out all of those sections, so that you're getting all of the template properly filled out before it arrives in your desk. So I just wanted to pull up here as well and briefly show you the collaboration features on Govlist. So it allows you to add stakeholders and invite them to come and collaborate on the document. We'll pull in information about them, send them reminder emails, and even track who's approved the document and who hasn't. And all of this happens in a beautiful online environment. Instead of doing this in Microsoft Word, you can collaborate real time on an online document and see those changes transpire over time. Changes are, of course, tracked over here in revision history, just like they would be in Google Docs or in Microsoft Word, but it all happens online. You can add comments to different sections and create to-do lists for project managers to work through as they're revising and collaborating on the document. So that's really where we've seen folks really radically change the way they do collaboration, using software to accelerate and improve not only the transparency between customers and procurement staff, but also the quality of the outcomes. It's been a really exciting transformation to watch. I'll also just show you, in addition to automating the scope writing process through Govlist, we've seen people get value out of posting and receiving proposals through Govlist, as well as evaluating through Govlist. And I'll quickly show you what those look like. So once we've written up our project, we can actually post it out to the world. And let me just pull up a project that's been posted here. So this is a different project that's already gone out to bid, and we've received some proposals back. Here's a list of the proposals, and as vendors submit proposals, they actually get cataloged here in a table for the purchasing team and the city staff. And we can click into them, view the documents as needed, and then assemble them into an evaluation packet that was going to go out to all the evaluators. And evaluators are going to receive a view like this. They're going to see all the evaluations. They can click through them, view documents in the tool as needed, and then adjust the scoring that they'll ultimately submit into the tool to arrive at an aggregate scorecard. And we can see this aggregate scorecard in a beautiful, well-illustrated table all in one place. And all of this happens in a extremely streamlined way because Govlist leverages the selection criteria and information from the actual drafting of the solicitation document up front and automatically sets up these tables for you. Not only does it save time, it also makes the lives of participants in the process significantly easier and more modern. Then finally, once we've gone through an entire procurement process, Govlist consolidates that data into detailed analytics, which you can see here. We track timelines, participants, departments, and can get very fine-tuned with the information that's available to you to track your progress over time. Not only does this come in a real-time dashboard, but we can also set up baseline data for your organization to track time savings from the beginning of a project through to implementation. So you can directly say, by implementing Govlist, project managers and procurement staff have saved X amount of time on this project. And generally what we've seen, our customer average is between 80 and 90% time savings on that process, which can have a really significant output or outcome for efficiency inside of an organization. I'm just going to stop there. I presented a lot of information and would be happy to answer more detailed questions about the way the tool works. But I think it'd be a good time to jump back into the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liam. That was a really comprehensive overview. our solution. So Liam, we're going to kind of go back and forth a little bit here. We're like now opening this up, the webinar up for kind of a question and answer period. And so let's go ahead and jump into that. If folks have some questions that they want to send their way, as we start to get them in, I'll make sure that we present them. All right, so one of the questions that's coming across here is, how much of my time and of my team's time will it take to set this up?
So I would start that off by saying that Govlist is a different breed of solution. We're a cloud-based software as a subscription service, and it's pretty turnkey. So the way the setup works is you would upload your templates into Govlist, and then typically it takes about an hour of working with your team to make sure that they've been uploaded properly, and then you're ready to go. Frequently, we see that taking less than a week to get going, and very minimal staff time. And another thing I'll call out is that there's actually a good amount of training and guidance built into the tool, which is where a lot of our customers call it TurboTax for RFPs, and that's because folks can jump in without prior knowledge and figure out very quickly how to use the tool and get guided through it. And so, it takes really minimal training on both sides to get it going, and the time to value is much shorter than what you'd see from a legacy software implementation.
Awesome, thanks, Liam. Yeah. Actually, what I'm going to do before we go to the next question, because I think some of them may be related to things that you might be able to show on screen, is I'm just going to turn presenter back over to you, and so why don't you just bring your screen back open, and that way, like if you want to illustrate something that's coming across, we could do that. Awesome. Okay, so the next one is also related to training. So we just talked about how training and implementation for the procurement staff. What kind of training are we going to have to do for our customers?
Yeah, I could walk you through a little bit what that looks like from a customer end user's perspective. Typically, again, think about it like TurboTax. When someone jumps into TurboTax, they don't need to be walked through or trained on software. They get guided through it. So if we go back to where we were actually drafting a document, let's come in here. The tool has tutorials built into it and guidance that will walk us through. So here, I'm just walking through my screen right now how some of this works. And the tool will literally train users as they're walking through it. There's a robust help center that's full of articles and documents that can answer pretty much any question. And then built into it, I'll go back to the actual writing flow. Each of these sections has detailed guidance not only on how to use Govlist, but how to apply best practices to your documents. And these will actually train your end users on how to write, for example, great scope of work items, which is such a difficult thing to get customers to remember and understand the trainings that are presented to them, maybe on an annual basis when they're actually writing an RFP. Well, in Govlist, it's actually right there at their fingertips when they're writing it.
Awesome, Liam. That sounds great. It sounds like it's really you kind of train as you use the product as opposed to doing a lot of training up front, which is awesome.
Exactly. That's how it's
Awesome. All right. So let's we got a couple more questions here. Why don't we go ahead and move to those? Let's see here. What about my legal team? What are they going to be worried about this software?
Yeah, good question. Legal teams are oftentimes in our implementations, and it's funny, we've actually had legal teams be sometimes our strongest advocates in an organization, and that's because the pain points that come up for legal are typically things like, for example, having to go through documents with a fine-tooth comb to find small changes that no one told them about. I mean, that's really where legal gets frustrated. They just want to know that their terms and conditions and any other legal boilerplate that need to be in the document are going to be in there, and that they can review just the variable or unique sections for every document, so they don't have to go through everything. And Govlist is built in a way that's designed to allow them to do that. They can achieve those outcomes. And we've seen legal teams be really excited and happy, not only with their ability to lock down boilerplate and content, but also with the notification functionality. So they can actually receive, we've set it up so that they can receive an email update when they get added to a project that tells them all of the folks who have approved that project, so they know all of the right folks have approved a project. The legal boilerplate is 100% there, and they'll feel much more comfortable reviewing that and sending it out to bid. It just creates a feeling of calm and certainty in the air.
Awesome. Thanks, Liam. I think one of the other things that I've heard too is just the proactivity, and you mentioned this earlier, but the proactivity that gets created when all the folks that are part of the team, whether it be legal or whether it be the procurement specialist, or even the folks that are the original project managers or your customers, that the notifications that you get and the fact that this is such a proactive system allows you to really stay in front of these projects.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so one more question. Interesting. So someone asks, I'm using currently Demand Star, BidSync, and Planet Bids. How are you guys different from other vendor bid systems?
Yeah, so that's a good one. Some of the folks you just listed out there are mostly focused on building vendor databases that allow you to post, some of which are actually free, and some of which are paid. But we see folks using those tools mostly to improve the number of vendors that they can get to respond to projects, which I think is a very valuable service in and of itself. Really, where folks use Govlist is in a complementary way to those types of services. Govlist really, it's a home base and a workstation for procurement pros to save time, and it's built for procurement professionals to automate all the folks that don't, all of the parts of the process that don't get automated in an ERP or a system like that. And that starts with collaboration with the end user. It starts with the workflows of approvals, and anything after that as well, ranging from receiving proposals back and organizing them to evaluating projects. And we're 100% focused on making life easier for those customers. And while we do have a beautiful, very friendly interface for vendors, they're not our primary customer.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Liam.
Yeah.
All right. We have another question here. How much does it cost?
That's a good one. So Govlist is it's a tiered pricing model. So we tier it based on what organizations can afford. So, for example, someone like New York City is going to be paying something very different than a small 20,000 person city would. And I think one of the benefits is that if you're a smaller organization, you can use the same software that a big city is using, but at a price point that's palatable and friendly to you. And I think that flexible pricing model has allowed a lot of different types of organizations to get value out of this.
Sounds pretty cool. Awesome. All right. So let's see here. It seems like we may have time for one more question here. Let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah. So this looks like software that would be really useful for a larger city. Would a smaller city like us get value out of the same tool?
So absolutely, we've seen it be really effective. It does, obviously, it does depend on how much procurement you're doing, and I think that what we've seen is that even if you're doing a handful of competitive procurements a year, those can eat up so much time from you, your staff, the organization, especially when folks aren't as familiar with how to navigate the process in a legal and compliant way, that new users can actually be and especially in smaller organizations, can be some of our best customers, because they really benefit from all the best practices and structure that Govlist provides.
I'll add that too, just because I've had a couple of conversations, and there's been a lot of conversations with smaller jurisdictions, is that when you're a team of one or two or even three, most small cities, small agencies still have a lot of units, a lot of departments. You got an IT department, you got a public works department, you've got folks that are working on facilities, you've got finance, administration, you've got all these different customers that you still have, that still need to purchase and make purchases for their needs as well. And so, because you have a small team, if you're in a smaller city, those needs are still there. And so you've got so many more people who are your customers, who you're going to have to work with. So all this is going to do is help you manage that. And actually decentralize it a little bit more, so it makes the volume of work that you're working on actually a lot more palatable.
And that's actually something we see come up.
Tal, I mean, you're checking the questions. I'm not sure if this came up, but sometimes people will ask, like, oh, well, just we're decentralized. Like, would Govlist work? And that's actually where Govlist started, was in a decentralized environment where project managers had to get in and write their own RFPs and scopes. And so it's built with the end user in mind. It's built with the customer in mind. And purchasing teams obviously receive a lot of benefits from it. It's sort of a no-brainer. It's like, oh, well, I can get a higher quality scope, and I can learn about it earlier and have it in a more structured and filled out format. Fantastic. But also on the other side of the equation, we see those decentralized project managers who are writing scopes. They were a core stakeholder group when we designed the product too. So, even in smaller cities where it's more decentralized, that's a really common theme that we see.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Liam. I just wanted to see, as we're closing up, Liam, are there any sort of closing thoughts that you wanted to leave the audience with?
Be happy to share a couple things that came to mind during this talk. And Tal, again, thank you so much for hosting this. I really appreciate it and organizing it. So I think first and foremost, if I leave one thing with cities, I wanted to leave the idea that we should stop thinking about RFPs as 100-page PDF documents. I think that's a archaic idea of what an RFP is, and it limits us in what we can accomplish with them. And I want us to start thinking about using RFPs and solicitations as online experiences that can hook into other systems and groups of people, bring us together in a collaborative online environment, and dramatically accelerate the outcomes that we all want to achieve in the purchasing process. And then secondly, just wanted to reiterate that I was so honored to be part of FAPPO's conference this year, and that I certainly, for one, took a tremendous amount away from talking with all of these incredible individuals here that have done so much for the community, and really excited to be able to share some of those learnings with folks here on the call, and would be happy to answer any questions that come up. So feel free to, my email is liam@thegovlist.us, and would be happy to connect with anyone that has follow-ups.
All right. Again, thank you so much, Liam, for joining us today and giving us a great introduction to Govlist. I also, just in closing, wanted to remind folks that please take a moment to go to LinkedIn, type in Govlist, or you can type in @Govlist and sign up to be a follower there. Also, we're active on Twitter, so you can go to twitter.com, and we're located at the Govlist or @the Govlist, and be looking for news from our company there. So once again, thanks everybody for joining us today. It's a really valuable discussion. We hope you got a lot out of it. And as Liam said, we're really honored to have been a part of the Florida Association of Public Procurement Officers Conference. All right, everyone have a great Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see you soon.